RC, what's happening, man? A pleasure to have you on the show. We've been huge fans of the content that you put out on Instagram, so we're excited for this episode. We think it's gonna be really valuable.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys and what you guys are putting out there too. It's like we've been kind of circling for a minute here, and I'm stoked to get the opportunity to at least not sit down, but kind of virtual sit down.
Absolutely. Yeah. If we can't do it in person, virtual is the second best thing. But we have a couple mutual friends. And one of the things that we were saying prior to hitting record is that you're a regenerative rancher out of Wyoming, and we'll let you tell that whole story. But you have some of our favorite content from a rancher's perspective. If someone goes to your Instagram, it's like a wealth of knowledge of you just kind of holding a camera up. You'll either be in your car out on the ranch, just talking about different aspects of our food system and how disconnected we've gotten. And it's just very cool for us to see ranchers like you that are really stepping up and being vocal and really trying to teach people about how disconnected we've gotten, but also give us tangible solutions for how we can get back to where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just happy that people want to listen because we're passionate about it and we believe in it. And I think it's really important that when you see things happening or mistruths being told, that we stand up and say, hey, wait a second, here's some other information that that to push back against it, because there's a lot of things going on that I don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, but it seems like a lot of farms have been growing social media presence at a faster pace and getting a lot of engagement. It seems like people are really interested in what's happening in the food system. Is that something that you've seen just from starting to put more content out there?
Yeah, you definitely, I mean, and rightly so, right? I mean, it's like I'm really happy to see that, because it's like people should care about food, because at the end of the day, to me, food is probably one of the most important things. I mean, it's like food, water, shelter, some air, that's important, but it's a common denominator that connects us all. And so, yeah, I think it's cool to see people, slowly starting to wake up to what's been happening in our food industry, and take control, because we're really talking about just empowering ourselves and take control of your life, to grow and be the best version of you, and quit relying on everybody to tell you what you need to be doing, and kind of trust your gut. So yeah, it's coming slow and steady, right?
Slow and steady, but we're making waves. And we totally agree with you, right? It's like we view that as the ultimate investment that you can make in your health. And if you're going to spend a little bit of extra money on something, why not nourish yourself with the most nutrient dense food? And the way that resonates with you is, like, number one, we love your videos on Instagram, but also the pictures that you will post of the beef from Carter Country Meats. It's like this really dark, rich, ruby red color. And I know one of the things that you've also mentioned is how much more nutrient dense some of your beef is compared to like the conventional beef you could get in the grocery store. So maybe we could just talk through some of the things that you try and do differently with your ranch to really get that rich color and that nutrient density.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess we were part of a study with Bionutrient Food Association. Everybody should check those folks out. Dr. Mark Hyman, Fred Provenza, Dan Kittredge, like, these are all folks that are really leading the charge, the spear tip, if you will, for nutrient dense food. So, I mean, and one of the questions those individuals have posed is, like, looking at our food system, go in the grocery store, everything is sold on water weight. It's all sold based off of weight. And so we look at all these foods, like take for instance a tomato, and you taste a tomato from your garden. 1 pound, eat a pound of tomatoes from your garden and a pound of tomatoes from a grocery store, and they taste completely different. Like, one has been bred just to be red and retain water, but there's like this whole other science of that our tongues understand, but we're just really getting to be able to quantitate that in terms of like nutrient density. And that's what these folks believe, and I totally agree with them, is that food shouldn't be sold on weight. It should be sold on the nutrient density, because then you can't bullshit that. there's only one way to get really nutrient dense food, and that's to raise it in accordance with the laws of nature and slow, and we can't speed that up. But so anyway, we were part of that a study with Bionutrient Food Association, and we received our results back, and it showed that, just to kind of go through it, that our beef was, so they had two databases. They've got a grass finished database of all the grass finished beef they've tested, and they've also got a grain finished database of all the grain finished beef they've tested. So when they looked at our beef, it showed that our nutrient density, the phytonutrient density, was 64% higher than their grain finished, 239% higher than, or 64% higher than their grass finished database, 239% higher than their grain finished database. Wow. So when people say, is there a difference? Like, you make your own decisions, but yes, there is a difference. Our omega 3-to-6 ratio, or is it 6-to-3 ratio, was 3.5 times better, considered 3.5 times more healthy than the average grass finished beef. And this was a crazy one that it showed that we had, I believe it was 70% more essential amino acids in our beef than the average grass finished beef.
Wow.
And I mean, it's just, I don't know. I'm not saying that, our beef is the best, but as far as like the numbers don't lie, right? And so it was really interesting to me, and I don't know why all those things hold true, and like why there's so much nutrient density. I'm not a scientist, but I know that we really try to practice, regenerative agriculture and really raising animals in a closer to the natural way of an animal would be raised. If you were to look at a cow, a bovine, and compare that to like a wild bison, that our ancestors get, like our animals are much closer to that. Even when you consider that bison, like right now, I think 93% of bison or buffalo are being actually finished on a grain finished diet. So, just trust your tongues, and believe what you believe. But that was what the numbers came out to be.
When did you start to see the phrase regenerative agriculture start to become popularized? It seems like recently it's starting to make its way onto labels, which I think is obviously like a turning point for it. But can you like maybe define it for people, for our audience, just so they have an understanding of what your opinion of regenerative agriculture is?
I feel, yeah, I'm terrible at memorizing things like that. Or I guess I just don't try. But I think understanding ag has a really great definition for it. To me, regenerative agriculture is just like putting effort into trying to do things more in accordance with the laws of nature. Mm-hmm. It's not being perfect. It's just saying, hey, we've got to do better than we did yesterday. Like that's our only competition, is how did you perform yesterday? Beat that guy. Beat your practices. Just continue to try to evolve. Get away from all these control vectors of buying stuff that comes in a jug with chemicals, and we can do it all with just biology. Through the right approach. It's not, you may have heard the term, it's not the cow, it's the how. Mm-hmm. And it's so true. It's just like, it's our management. Our management approach is really what is failing with food production in general. It's mm-hmm. like we can do it, but we've taken a very kill everything, very sterile approach to the food industry. And I feel like those chickens are going to come home. I mean, they already are, right? It's like, look. I read something that 73% of Americans are, diet consists of unprocessed foods. Had you heard that?
Yeah, I think the statistic I had heard
Like,
it's like 63% of Americans' calories are coming from ultra processed foods.
it's nuts, man. Like, it's absolutely nuts. And I don't believe anything anybody tells me. I have to go, I'm going to go try something myself, you know? And
Yeah.
so, and I used to be a total dirt, like, I used to drink like Mountain Dew, and I mean, by the bucket load of that stuff. Like, I love that stuff, you know, and the triple stacker, those little processed, little packaged hamburger whatever's from the grocery store. Like, I used to live off of that stuff, and my wife was like, "You're an idiot. Like, why?" So she cleans my diet up, and I'm like, "Okay, whatever." Unwillingly do it. Well, all of a sudden, you start to feel better, and I
Mhm.
feel like that's where we're at. Is like, nobody, like, if you're eating crap, like, you don't even know what your potential to feel good feels like, because you've never tapped that. So it's
Yeah.
like, if you just tighten it up, just like discipline yourself for, you know, 10 days. And I'll guarantee you, the weird thing that happens is when you start to eat clean, like, you can't go back to eating garbage, because then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I feel terrible. And now you're like, it was because of that. Like, I ate that thing and
Mhm.
that makes me feel bad.
Yeah.
But until you tighten it up, like, you don't understand.
Yeah, it's not just health for the sake of health, it's health for the sake of building resilience and living an incredible life. It's something Harry and I have been spending a lot of time just exploring on the show of the reason why you're eating these nutrient dense foods, like for you, is to become the best husband you could be, the best father, the best rancher. And you're just not going to be doing that eating the triple stackers and the Mountain Dew. But I think it's so interesting how you're a multi-generational rancher, so you're as close to the food system as you can get, but the stuff is still so mainstream and so popularized and no one knows how to eat. So you're working as a rancher and you're also drinking Mountain Dew because no one's teaching you how to actually eat. It's so interesting.
Yeah. No, that education, it's just like, you really had to go search it out, you know. And it sucks. Like, I wish that the Mountain Dew and, garbage diet worked. Like, it's so
Yeah.
good, right?
Oh, of
Like,
course. Yeah.
but I just know that, like, I try to operate at a high level. Like, that's my whole goal, is just to, like, evolve as a human and get better and be better and be more efficient and be more productive and all those things. And I've tried it, and it doesn't work. Like,
Mm.
the clean whole diet is so much better. And, we call it discipline, but it's like, really, what's the cost of you not doing that? And so much of it comes down to, like, our just short-term perspective is, we're like, what we're eating now, people, it's so hard for people to grasp. And, like, we've got three kids, and we're working with them, and they're slowly getting it. It's like, dude, what you're doing now, like, you're going to pay, like, maybe it's 30 years from now, but, like, you're going to have to pay the piper
Mm.
sooner or later. But there's the disconnect, as far as, our society's got us just thinking so immediate and short term. It's sad. And so, like, getting back to the soil, it's the same thing in the soil. And how we're raising food, everything's just short term gains. So
Mm.
everybody is just making, you know, ranchers and farmers, like, it's crazy how, we're just raised in a real scarcity mindset. The farmers and ranchers are, like, the most debt leveraged. I mean, it's such a scarcity mindset, because there's just no money out there.
Mm.
If that's 100% where you're getting it, like, it is so tight. And it's so you're always just looking like, okay, how did I do this year? But there's no, like, okay, what are we doing in 50 years from now? I mean, that's really where we need to be. And that's where I see regenerative agriculture is just, it's nothing but hope. Like, nobody that's preaching regenerative agriculture is showing up at your doorstep and being like, hey, I got this thing I'd like to sell you here. It's just like, they're not selling anything but just logic, like biology, ecology, culture, and, like, happy society. And,
Mhm.
we've just been, the more we wade into it and dip it, it's like, it's the truth. It's the truth.
You you touched on nutrient density before, and I feel like there's a path forward where maybe people can start thinking about nutrient density and then pairing that with regenerative agriculture. Like they kind of go hand in hand. But how do you see like this whole concept of starting to price food based off nutrient density potentially unfolding? Because I feel like for most people, that's such a foreign concept. They're just used to seeing food show up on a shelf. They don't really care where it comes from. But in reality, like food should be your multivitamin. You don't need to go and
Yeah.
popping pills to get, all the vitamins that you need. But unfortunately, we're in that state right now where the soil's so depleted that these foods don't really have everything you need.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how that'd be a great question for Dan Kittredge. You should have him on.
Mm.
He's a brilliant mind. I mean, I wouldn't even know how a person would measure that, but I guarantee you those guys would have an idea, because
Yeah.
that's the thing. If you're selling food on nutrient density and not just like, what people don't really understand, or something that was really profound to me was, when you look at an ingredient label and there's like 7 or 9 different things on, the label of your food, carbs, sugars, maybe some vitamin A, whatever. But there's actually, and so then you go and if you're sick and you have your blood work, they're looking at 150 things. And then you get into this realm of like phytonutrients and metabolites. And it's like, it's these unique chemicals that are, are embedded in every individual, plant, flora that's out there. And so an animal that's going out and consuming a diverse diet, these chemicals are taken into its body and stored in its fat. And they're just now uncovering this. Like, we have no idea like what they do. They've got some pretty good ideas that, some of them are like very high in antioxidant properties, but it's like the jungle, and we don't know what the heck any of this stuff is. And we've just identified it. And mainstream doctors are like, no, we've got it figured out. And you're like, dude, we have, I was talking to, Dr. Stefan von Vliet. So he's the guy that he's in the lab doing this research. And I said, wow, man, this is amazing that, you've found this. And he's a great guy, because he's like super open-minded. Here he could say, yep, I figured it out. And he's like, honestly, he's like, with the technology we have, he's like, he told me, he said he thinks that he is only seeing 5% of what's actually there with the technology we have. So it's like, to say that we understand food, like, we don't. And so then it comes down to like, well, what can you trust? Well, to me, I believe in nature. Like, nature's not gonna lie to you ever. Like, people, they'll lie to you. Like, oh, we got to get some more money. Here's a label. It's this, it's that. And so it's like, I think the closer you can eat to just a natural diet, like, in the long run, quit overthinking everything. Trust your tongue. When it comes to whole foods, your tongue's going to tell you, if something's healthy or flavorful or not. And then, free up some bandwidth to go be productive or be creative or do something else. But it's a wild time right now. It's exciting to see these things. It's happening very quickly right now.
Definitely. And your website, when you go to your homepage, it's like a wealth of information and knowledge on there. And I think one of the things you call out is how, when you're buying meat from Carter Country Meats, it's very limited touch points. Whereas like the grocery store, it can be dozens of touch points from where the food is initially sourced to all the processing to where it gets to you in that bag. And so I think a very simple approach for nutrition is like, just get as close to the source as possible, get as close to the rancher as possible. And I think the amazing thing about the studies that you've had done is that you're actually able to quantify the effects of how your regenerative practices actually have on the nutrition. And I think that's a really contentious topic in the carnivore or the alternative health community of like grain finished beef versus grass finished beef. And our perspective has always been like, if we can get you moving towards real foods, that's a massive win. Prioritizing animal protein, good quality vegetables, fruit, fats, etc. But to like get to the 1% of the 1%, if you could take it to another level and really prioritize that grass finished beef, particularly from a regenerative farm, that's the best of the best. And so the fact that you actually have data to support that is huge. And now we can quantify a lot of the stuff. So I'm sure that gets you really excited because that's a testament to everything that you and your family are doing.
100%, man. And I think you're totally right. I mean, a lot of people, I shouldn't say that. It's very easy to come out and say, we're this or you're wrong. And it's like, man, there's like, you've got, you've got, you've got good, you got bad, and then you have everything under the spectrum, right? And so it's like, I think as far as a society, we have to agree somewhere. It's like, let's start with like, okay, a lot of sugar, 136 pounds of sugar a year, that's maybe excess. Like that's what the average American's eating right now. And you look at like our prevalence of insulin resistance and diabetes and cancer. It's like, okay, I think that ultra processed foods and like a high sugar diet is bad. And then you just like, so if you're eating that, like, yeah, you should totally be eating, McDonald's patties, McDonald's hamburger patties. Like, I wouldn't eat that. But if that's where you're at, so it's like this ladder of like moving in a direction towards healthy. And like, I don't care if somebody's eating, a totally GMO, glyphosate ridden, corn finished beef. Like, to me, that's like, well, not for the land, but for a person, that's probably better than eating Cheetos and, and processed foods. But if you're looking for the pinnacle as you continue to just like split the hairs of health, I mean, I really do believe that, grass-fed, grass-finished beef that's probably where it's going to end up, and time will tell. But that's where we're at as far for right now. So it's a progression, and if you can afford it and you want to do better, just keep moving that direction.
RC, I'd love to take a step back maybe and just understand how you got onto this path as a farmer and then really got your conviction around regenerative agriculture. Was that something that you were always passionate about, or did that click for you kind of later on as you got started in farming?
Yeah, I don't know. It was just a progression, just like everything. I mean, I graduated college in 2001, came back, decided, I'm going to commit to the ranch. Married my beautiful wife, Anya, and then her and I started, went down the family path. And so we're on the ranch, and we just basically would save all of our money that we would make. If there was some, we would just invest it back into the ranch because, I mean, it's hard. Ranching is like such a hard, it's so like physically, mentally, like it's a real challenge. And that's why I love it though, is because it keeps me out of trouble because I've always got something to focus on. You're never done, right? And so we invested into the infrastructure, and my approach was watching all these older men, these mentors and heroes of mine, just basically get ground down into, these arthritic corpses is, I want my ranch to work for me rather than me work for it. And so that was my approach. And so when problems, the, reoccurring problems would pop up, I would try to, instead of just like beating my head against the tree, is kind of the adage out here, and forcing my way into a solution, I would kind of step back and, like maybe we should get a 10,000-foot view on this and like try to change what we're doing. So that's always been our approach. And it seems to be working, and so at one point in time, we've got 500 irrigated acres. We had the pivots and we're producing. And, the next step was really to just start growing corn. And I'm not a fan of, I've sat in tractors along, 17-hour days and, replaced hydraulic pumps. And it's just like, I don't really enjoy it. So I'd rather be out like zooming around on my motorbike, like looking at reservoirs. So it didn't really resonate with me to grow corn. So then I got kind of turned on to like Alan Savory and Joel Salatin. Those were like the big guys back then, 10 years ago, and decided to kind of start moving that path and growing more perennial permaculture and going down that road. So yeah, it's been a long progression. And what's really cool about it is like you never stop learning. Like every day, if you're open and have have some awareness about you, like you're gonna step outside and realize that like you've been doing something wrong. I mean, and that's pretty, like, it's kind of humbling because you're like, damn, I should figure this stuff out sooner or later. But at the same time, it's like, it's exciting too, to just keep learning about it.
Yeah, it's exciting just to hear your story. And I'm just curious, are there any like just big picture goals that you and your wife have for the ranch long term?
I mean, one is, we want to sell 30 cows a month. That's all we want to do. We don't want to sell 31 cows. That's our goal. And we've been spending a lot of time talking about like the meat and nutrition, but it's like really all that stuff kind of, it's like a byproduct, right? It's like really what we want to do is like we want to heal our land. Like we're living out here in the middle of the Bighorn Basin, and there's studies. There was a BLM study that just came out. It was a 40-year study, and it basically states that I think 25 million. They consider 25 million acres of public land severely degraded. And like 45 minutes from here, there's a dam called Yellowtail. It's up by Lovell, Wyoming, kind of east of Cody, Wyoming. And it's just filling up with sediment. And so they're like, everybody's scratching their heads. The engineer's like, hey, man, how are we going to get all this sediment out? And it's like, all that sediment is coming from these, like the hills, and it's coming from this country as it's washing away. And my belief is that it's all of this is a transgression of like the loss of the bison. We lost the bison were straight up murdered. And I mean, I don't know how more of a, that's what happened. Like they were killed on purpose. And those were the true stewards of the land. There was, 40 to 60 million bison out here, and they were an integral part of the nutrient cycling of all of these grasses. So we have to look back in time and say, well, before European encroachment in the American West, like we have to pretty much agree that like that was as close to perfect as there could have been. Like we have to agree that there was an equilibrium with the natives that were living here and the animals that were here. There was an abundance and a balance. And then once we lost all those bison, and the beaver too, that was another huge keystone species. Then all of a sudden, there's like we changed the equilibrium up, and we see pictures that like the grasses have kind of gone away. For there to be, they say in our area there was 4 to 6 million bison would come through here every year, and now I feel like there's close to only 50,000 cattle in this area year round. But that's a huge decrease. And so I think that's where, to answer your question, like where we're at now is like we want to fix our soil, and we want to heal this land and return it back to like what I feel its potential is. And so actually where I'm headed after this is I'm going out and we're working on reservoirs and developing water so that we can graze a large herd of cows. So we've gone all in. We're working on a pilot program. This next year, we'll have 1,500 animals in one group, and we're just going to be moving them on a daily basis and really trying to recreate that the bison's grazing pattern. And so for those that don't understand, I'll just like kind of give you a crash course in it. It's like the bison would come through in like massive herds. Maybe people have heard of like the railroad, and the railroad have to stop and wait for like 2 or 3 days for one herd of bison to come across. Well, the bison would graze in what was considered a high intensity, low time duration. Like they moved as one. They would just be one mass, and they would move across and there was competition. Like if you wanted to eat something, like you better get to eating. You didn't get to be picky about what was, what you're going to eat. So it was this high intensity, low time duration and massive herd. Because if you were like a lone bison off by yourself, like something's going to eat you. So you stayed in the herd for protection. And then, all the bison were killed. And then we see like, the Texas cattle drives, they were bringing large herds up here. So it was still large herds and high intensity, but there was no rest period. The bison would come through and then like the next year they would go a different direction because they completely it would almost seem as though it's plowed. Accounts from the U.S. cavalry would say, they'd fall in behind a herd of bison and they would say that, their horses almost died because they didn't see a blade of grass for 3 days. They'd eat everything. And if it rained, like they would just turn it into a mud hole and they'd poop and they'd pee in it and mix their biology. And the biology from their stomach would communicate with the biology in the soil and the bacteria. And so it was just a big mess. And they wouldn't come back for a year, 2, maybe 3, who knows. And so then we transitioned into like the cattle drives coming up. And so it was high intensity, low time duration with no period of rest. And then there's like little villages and civilizations popping up. So now these, like if you're Rancher Bob, there's no fences. Now everybody's cows are just living around town. And so it's just continual, just like the ground just got hammered. Well, and then in 1934, the Taylor Grazing Act was passed, which the government recognized there's a problem. So they came in, split the American West into little pieces of pie and said, okay, rancher, this is your piece. This is how many cows. And like basically divvied the whole thing up. Well, at that point in time, we transitioned from high intensity, low time duration to high time duration, low intensity. So now it's like, okay, put your cows in that pasture and they're going to stay there for 3 months. And so basically, if we believe what nature's perfect, since we have been grazing the exact opposite of what the bison, that scenario and that equilibrium allowed for since 1934. And so I think that's the problem. I think it's not the cow, it's the how, it's the management. The cow is basically a proxy for the bison in 2022. So let's try. And let's try to do it like in scale. People question like, is regenerative agriculture scalable? And I'm like, well, isn't the bison proof that regenerative agriculture is scalable? Like, it happened without anybody like doing it, And so it's like, if that was the potential, if we have potentially lost 20-fold grass production out here in the Bighorn Basin, which is, it's a hypothesis, but it's like nobody's saying no, then like, what is the potential? What have we like with proper management? Maybe the potential is even higher than that. And that's what's really cool is like, we're going to live with these cows all summer long for probably 6-8 months. And we're just going to graze them. And we've got, some guys who check out Snaplands, Ryan White, Charlie Orchard, and Land EKG, and this like awesome science. So we finally have scientists, right? That's what we've always like. I'm like, we need some scientists. And we've got scientists involved to start quantitating our data. Caitlin Youngquist, she's going to be a big part of that. And I'm so stoked to see what we come up with. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe we're just like, we're completely wrong. But, at the end of the day, you got to try.
Totally. It's so encouraging hearing you talk about this because from my perspective, it is a little bit frustrating when people doing things the right way have to quantify like the soil quality actually improving. I know we were down at White Oak Pastures and Will Harris was asked a question about how he measures soil quality. And he said he just sticks his shovel in the ground and he can tell the difference, right? But I mean, that's what people are asking for. They need to see the quantifiable numbers, the study to show that this is the right way to go. And it does feel like if there is enough momentum with people paying attention that we can actually make a change here. So it's just really encouraging and exciting to hear you say that and tell that story.
Yeah, I think it's real. I mean, it sure feels right. and then at the end of the day, it just comes down to support and, to keep the momentum going, it's just like garnering support and, just operating with some honesty and integrity and saying, hey, does anybody else want to try something? Like, what the hell is it going to hurt to try? We've been we know the direction we're going if we don't change anything. And
Right.
so it's like, I think that sucks. Like, let's go this way
Yeah.
and see what happens. So I think it's very optimistic, and it's gonna be fun to do, and just participate. We did it. My wife, and I, we pulled the kids out of school last year, and we just went out and we did it for like 6 weeks. And I don't know, man, but I mean, I live on a ranch, so I feel terrible for people who live in a city and like in their got to go to the cubicle. But even that, just like living out in the hills for 6 weeks, like I went feral. Like we all went feral. Like the kids are just like running around, like just covered in dirt, playing with sticks, being creative. And we're just like waking up to sunrise. And I'm like, whoever convinced us to like live in the box, like that's lame. Like it's so lame compared to the alternative of just like being out under the stars, because it makes you feel little. You're just like you're connected. You get connected to like what's really real out there, and it really makes you question what we're doing here, because it's good to feel small, and it's humbling, because we do have a tendency to get caught up in our own heads. So it's great.
Yeah, we definitely do. And it's definitely humbling. And I would say the opposite of what you're speaking about right now is a term that you've used before called you referred to it as the great poisoning, which is something we talk a lot about. And it's interesting, right? Because like we're in Austin, which is a health hub. So you go to these gyms and restaurants and communities, and a lot of people just happen to be in shape because it's centered around health and wellness. And people are really intentional. They're sourcing the meals, et cetera. You're very intentionally out on a ranch. That's what your community is. You, your wife, your kids, you take a ton of preparation into the food. That's your normal. But when you go to like an airport or a public place, you realize that the things that we're talking about, couldn't be further from what normal actually is. And unfortunately, like you said, the majority of people are eating processed foods. They're working a cubicle job that they despise. They're getting artificial blue light. They have anxiety. They have depression. We're hopping kids up on sugar. They can't focus on the classroom. We get them on legalized amphetamines. So it's like there's like this one conversion path this way, and then there's a whole other path that you're laying out, which is like getting out into nature and connecting with a rancher and cooking your food and just being intentional with the way that you live your life. And it's a very simple approach, but it's such an effective approach. And I feel like that's if there's one thing that someone could take from this conversation, that's really what I'm getting from you, is it's like the simple thing always works, and just get closer connected to the food that you're eating and who's providing your food. And you might be surprised at how amazing that makes you feel.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. Like that intentional life. I think the biggest lie we've ever been told is that it's complicated. Like it's not. It's like simple. If it's like that's what the lawyers tell you. Like, man, yeah, you don't understand. It's complicated, and you're like, wait a second. Like most of the time when things get complicated, like it's bullshit. Like it's just some paperwork, thing to just like to get something out of you. And it's like food's simple. Like don't overthink it. And I mean it's you were talking about the airport, and I hit it. This was like I had a really profound moment when I flew to Dallas. I don't know, it was a couple weeks ago. And I had this, like, I stayed with a buddy, and I went out under his little oak trees. So I just came from the Arctic of Wyoming, and I hit like 75 degrees, and I just like got up in the morning, had a great cup of coffee, and I went and sat under my buddy's. He's got all these oak trees out there and the moss, and I was like, this is so cool. And the air was just like, it was almost like ocean air. and I just did like a couple rounds of breath work under this tree, and I felt so dang good. I was just sitting on the dirt. And then when I was flying out in Dallas, like I'm going through checkout, and like I look around and like everybody's pissed.
Yeah.
Like everybody was just like the expression of cardboard, pissed off. Like the bag checker, the freaking security lady, like the three employees I love coffee. So I go to Starbucks. Coffee is not that great, but you're limited in the airport. So I go in, and then there's three employees in Starbucks, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like everybody is so freaking miserable.
Yep.
Like you just look around and you're like, man, I'll bet you like I could take any one of those people and be like, come with me for a week.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what we're going to do. You'd have to drag them kicking and screaming. But after a week, you're like, okay, Whole Foods, you're going to sauna, you're going to exercise, or we're going to put you in a cold dip. You're going to do some breath work. Like you're going to listen to some binaural beat. I'll guarantee you a week later, people will be like, what the hell? I've been doing it wrong. You're like, yeah. And so there's like these very simple tools that we can use. And I think, to kind of round that whole out is like food, man. If you're eating garbage, like good luck. You are not going to have any clarity in your mind. Like it's going to be hard. So it's so much harder unless you're eating real foods. Like it's like, I mean, people like, I don't know. I love to like every once in a while get a wild hair and just like go on, do a fast just for the heck of it, just to prove to myself that I can. And like this clarity that comes into your mind when you just stop eating altogether and just clean up, like it's profound. It's really pretty amazing stuff. But none of this is mainstream, so you really got to search it out. But thanks to you guys and folks like you and podcasts, like, man, it's like, it's seeping out, right? It's like the truth is just steadily seeping out now. And good luck plugging that one.
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing about what you're talking about too is a lot of the things that you just mentioned are totally like in your control. And they're also, for the most part, like relatively simple to incorporate into your life if you're just intentional about it. Like, I mean, breath work, like that's something everyone can do and it's free. And it'll have a measurable effect on how you feel throughout the day, week, months. I mean, if you can stick with it, that's a habit that will help you in every capacity of your life. And I just think it's so it's like discouraging when you walk through these like central hubs of where people are. It's like, man, you really see like the dark side of the moon. It's like, what's happening out here?
Yeah, it makes you just want to run the other direction. I'm like, oh, I'll give you a hug, like, hang in there, partner. Breath work, and they're like, what the hell's wrong with you? Breath work. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's what the hell's wrong with me, but I'm actually happy and enjoying my life, where it's like, you're miserable and frustrated. So it's almost like you have to approach it with grace and just,
Yes.
we can share decentralized forums like this and just have honest conversations. And just, I think one of the things we've talked about is it's one conversation at a time, one handshake at a time, one steak sold at a time. And it's like, you'd be surprised at what can happen if we just focus and be intentional, man. And, I think you have such an intentional approach about the way that you ranch, the way that you approach nutrition, the way that you're, approach your family life. And, we've just learned a lot from this conversation, man. And we appreciate everything that you do. And we appreciate you coming on the show to sit down and talk with us for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to invite you guys to come out. If your schedule coincides, but this spring, we're trying to put together basically a mobile cow camp, right? So it's like the cow camp of the old days, complete with like, I'm trying to find like a sauna company and a cold dip company, so we can just like live off the grid, but have like all these great tools and just like a place where people can come and participate and just like come connect, come out to the middle of nowhere, wake up and see the sunrise, and then ride a horse bareback through 1,500. Well, they'll have babies, so it'll be 3,000 cows. Like honestly, we did it last year, not to that scale, but it's nuts. Like there's an energy that comes off that many animals that like words don't do it. Like the only way you get it is just to feel it. And you're like, holy smokes. Like that it's something. So I'd love to have you guys come out and check it out.
That'd be awesome. We would love that. That's right up our alley. And maybe we could help out getting you some of those cold plunges. We've met a few people in the space, so we should definitely stay in touch on that. But again, RC, just appreciate you and everything that you're doing. The message is strong, and just really thankful for your time today.
Yeah, gentlemen, I appreciate everything you're doing, and yeah, just keep pushing.
Right on.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
All right, have a great day.
You too, man.